So I feel like there's been a ton of information, and at this point it's sort of drinking from a fire hose. So I can do my presentation and walk through it, or we can just go right to the Q&A. That way we can get some more live stuff. So any preferences on just start with Q&A? Okay, tough crowd. All right, we're going to go into Q&A because I don't like PowerPoints. All right. Okay. Well, then we'll get going, and we started our direct care practice September 2nd, 2010, straight out of residency, again, with the same idea that everyone else has had, that insurance is broken. Over that time, we've been able to go from one doctor, no patients, 2 locations, 5 doctors, all full and doing well. And then over the years, we've been able to help over 500 doctors in 41 states to convert to direct primary care themselves. And I think what we've seen is that there's no one right way to do it. We have to match the model to the doctor. And the cheesiest advice I ever got, but the most effective advice, was to define success. And we really have to say, well, what do you want? You want full-time or part-time? Family medicine or internal medicine? Do you want to focus on mental health, or do you want to do something else? But in that process, as we get there, the doctors get overwhelmed with just the whole process. Where do I start? I'm working full-time, and then I'm coming home at the end of the night. I'm trying to make business decisions, and my brain's not built for making business decisions, and so the process feels painful and slow. But it's very doable. It's a lot of little things. So if we want, we can go through and kind of create a practice right away, or we can get into the burning questions that you have right now, based on everything people have said. Any questions? Come on, guys. What do you want to do? What's your burning thought? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thanks for talking to us. How detailed so I'm in the business planning phase. Mm-hmm. How detailed should it be? I mean, minute by minute, dollar by dollar. I mean, just because many of us haven't had to write I didn't write a business plan, so.
There you go. How detailed does that business plan need to be? Simple. 1 page to start with. You can buy business planning software that'll go through 30 pages and zip code analysis and average age and all these other things that none of us have ever done. And we probably don't need to. Healthcare is a commodity like milk and gasoline. Everybody needs it. We have doctors in small towns like Holton, Kansas with Vance. There's 2 physicians doing direct primary care in Buena Vista, Colorado, in a town of 2,500. So this is a very doable model. Start with the basics, go through the checklist that the AAFP provides and other doctors provide, and do the basics. You know, you've got overhead, you've got rent, you've got insurance, and go from there. As you get deeper into it, you can fine-tune it, but the biggest process is just getting started. You know, how much to spend on rent? Who knows? How much money do you have? And how much do you want to spend? So you can make your budget fit the model and go from there. Antioch Health is in my town. They started on $15,000, and their practice is great. Other practices have started with hundreds of $1,000s in loans, and they do well too. So there's a huge range for making this work well. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any comments on those of us who are doing traditional family practice who might want to go to a hybrid practice? Can you have both traditional and some patients who are direct primary care?
Okay, good question. What about hybrid practices? So one of my dad's favorite jokes is about rabbit stew. Guy goes to the bar and they've got rabbit stew, and he says, I've never had that before, so I'll try that. And he's eating it, and it's good, and he's talking to the bartender, says, man, this is really good rabbit stew. But I got to admit, some of these pieces of meat feel kind of big for rabbit. And the bartender says, yeah, sometimes it's hard to get enough rabbit for rabbit stew. He says, well, what do you do? He says, well, we use other meat. He's like, what? And the guy says, horse meat. The patient says, geez, didn't think I'd be eating horse. It was rabbit stew, but it doesn't taste too bad. He goes, well, surely you don't use a lot of horse, right? And the bartender says, no. 50-50. 1 rabbit, 1 horse. So I think with the hybrid model, in for a penny, in for a pound, it's like running a vegan steakhouse. It's doable, but hard. Now, some people do it as a transition phase, and that makes more sense. Say, well, I've got one contract I can't get out of for 3 months. So I'm going to do that, but as I dwindle down towards the main primary care model. If a little insurance was good, a lot of insurance would be great, and I don't think any of us are here because a lot of insurance is working out really well. So the hybrid model tends to be more of a stepping stone to the direct care practice. Doable, you just pull out one piece at a time. Dr. Ben Lee with Epiphany Health has done that, was already committed to a large practice, and just over the years removed their worst payers until they were DPC. So.
Thank you for your talk here. I'm Yolanda, I'm from New York. I have a pretty good, thriving family practice right now in New York City. So I'm one of the few solo doctors out there that could say, you know, I'm doing pretty well. However, I'm inundated with all the insurance requirements, so I'm going to transition fully to DPC, hopefully in January. What advice do you have as far as like telling all these insurance companies I'm going to drop them? Like, do you recommend 90 days or, you know?
Most of the time, your insurance contracts will tell you how to get out.
Okay.
So you can call them up, and we've seen everything from a simple phone call to the right department and register that you're going to stop on such and such date, to know you need to send a certified letter 30, 60, 90, 120 days out. So it'll just be important to go into each contract and do that, because that ends up being the longest part of the timeline you're not in control of. Especially in a converting practice where you already have a location and patients and staff and all these other pieces that would normally have to come together. So you just want to make sure that you know what your longest one is, so you can walk backwards on your timetable.
Sorry, and then the second question is, how do I onboard the patients? Like, how much time do I need to transition? Like, I have about 4,000 patients. How do I onboard them to this DPC model?
Converting an existing model is fantastic because they've already bought the product you're selling. You're the solo doctor in a world where there's not a lot of solo independent doctors. So you can go right to them. I don't think there's ever a bad time for pre-enrollment. And that's one thing we talk about when you're converting a practice. Your new job, or when you're starting a practice, is sales. And I know that's a dirty word for most doctors. Consider it more education. You're telling them how you're solving problems that they have. And the sooner you start doing that, the sooner they can start thinking about it and processing it. I would say for taking stuff in terms of actually enrolling them, maybe 2 to 3 months out. But you can start educating them. You'll get my slides in your packet. One of the things Dr. Madsen did in Ohio was he converted in 6 weeks from middle of November to the end of January or end of December, and pre-enrolled over 300 patients in that short amount of time, even in the holidays, because he did a very simple thing. It's one page that all the staff went through each time with every patient for 6 weeks. And it was, here's all the things DPC does well and essentially free, and then blanks for everything on the other side. And then let's tally up what you spent, what things cost, and if this number was greater than the direct care membership, you should join. So he really did a very nice show and tell there for patients. Here in dollar and cents, black and white, is the value I'm offering you. It made it easy for the staff, and that was big. He got engagement from his staff to go in and be excited to tell these patients about this new thing. Here's how we're helping you. That was their why, and it made it very clear and transparent to the patients that this was a thing designed to make their lives better, and so he got a lot of adoption from his patients.
I live in a rural community. I've lived there most of my life. I've been in practice over 40 years. I have probably about half my practice is Medicare, and then the other half I've known for a long time. And this is probably the biggest problem I have is kind of letting go, and I have a real problem with that, and
Okay.
and it's I really don't know how to get around that.
What would your goal practice size be?
Oh, I don't know, 300-400.
Okay. I mean, I think there comes a point for all doctors where they have that. I love my patients. I mean, we still hopefully love medicine, maybe burnt out on the process of it for a lot of doctors, or the relationship there, but that doesn't have to end. But it is probably better to go from 3,000 to a few hundred patients than to burn out and retire or quit or leave medicine. So you can still transition a lot of those patients over. Now, the benefit of running an older practice is, your kids are probably through school and paid off and debt. And so we've seen a lot of older docs have a more cost-effective model for their patients because they don't need as much revenue. They're just overhead's lower, the building's paid off, et cetera. So you could still incentivize all those patients, keep those relationship-wise, show them the value, but adjust the metrics of your practice to fit that lifestyle.
Well, the Medicare patients were an issue. I mean, that's like a real issue, and I'm just having trouble working that out.
So you could keep Medicare, and for all its warts, and then do direct care for everyone else. That's one of those dividing lines where it's still a bit of a hybrid, but it's...
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is this thing on? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Khalil. When you first started your practice, did you keep in regular contact with an accountant and a lawyer during the first few months, or was that you just consult them at the very beginning?
The lawyer?
A lawyer and an accountant? And
Yes.
did you need like a special DPC lawyer, or
Yeah.
give me your recommendations on that? Thanks.
The only good lawyer is a DPC lawyer. So yeah, Luann Leeds is the lawyer we use, and a lot of people here have used. There are others. Obviously, Phil's fantastic, but Phil's just one man. So he has a ton of information on his website, and that can be really helpful because sometimes lawyers will try to reinvent the wheel. So maybe their first time, it's a brother, it's a friend, it's a neighbor, doing some help, but then they're trying to figure everything else out and interpreting it their own way, and that can disrupt your startup and your flow and think, well, now I have to have everybody do X, Y, or Z that none of us else do. So if nothing else, get an expert. Luann Leeds is a wonderful expert, or get a lawyer who's going to see what all the other docs have done so that they can keep it simple. We don't need large contracts. We don't need complications. Patients don't like that. Doctors don't like that. So keeping it simple. Now, for an accountant, same thing. Find an expert and follow their advice. I mean, that's what we're asking our patients to do for us. And the accounting can get very complex. Now, if you just want, I'm a solo practice, I'm going to be part-time, it's going to be a very simple thing, then you can adjust accordingly. But if you're going to be having a partner and starting and signing contracts and leases, then it really is worth it to go ahead and have an accountant help you out with the bookkeeping, the tax forms. I mean, the manila envelopes that come across my desk on April 15th are ridiculous. Then you got to file quarterly taxes depending on your state or your revenue, and all that detracts from the main thing that you're good at. You're a doctor, Jim, not an accountant. So don't be an accountant. Go ahead, take the money. I know in the startup phase, you're holding on to every dollar because we're cost-effective people, but it'll pay off in spades to have it done well, done right, and let you go focus on recruiting patients and growing the practice. So I definitely recommend a good lawyer and a good accountant. And then they'll recommend what software to get. Everybody here probably uses something a little different of the top three. And they all are good software. They all have reasons why they like it. You can't make a wrong decision. And if I could make any point over and over in this, it doesn't matter who you get your website from or, if you use FreshBooks or QuickBooks. These are easy decisions. Pick one and move on to the next part of growing your practice. Okay. Go ahead.
Two-part question. So with as complicated as insurance, the entire environment is, I'm super skittish about opting out of anything. I take care of patients in the hospital. I have a rural health clinic, which means that I get an enhanced reimbursement for my Medicaid patients. I have a very large practice and 9 employees. So my thought is that I want out 100%. But if I opt out of Medicare, Medicaid, and all my insurance plans and offer just the DPC and sort of do this hybrid, my 2 PAs, I don't want to leave them high and dry, nor do I want them to move on. I'd rather them continue practicing, and I can supervise them in a way, and they can continue in this ridiculous system that we are all fee-for-service system that we're in. So my thought is if I opt out of all these things and just move completely out of the insurance business, I have a hard time believing that Medicare, Medicaid, and all the insurance companies are going to keep it straight that me, the physician, is a separate entity from all the rest of the business that I've built.
It's a little bit harder. There's doctors who've done it, doctors who own a model where there's some staff. They were partial owner in an established practice, and they want to pull out, so they're still owning a piece of that, but they have a paperwork separation where I've got a new location, a new tax number, I'm clearly something else. And the nice thing is you're not submitting anything on that side, so there's really not much to get confused about. And then you're not submitting anything to insurance for this. So you're effectively off their radar for the vast majority of stuff. So there's not a whole lot for them to get confused about. Even for Medicare, when you opt out, you still maintain your PCOS number, so you have ordering and prescribing status. So you can still send them to the pharmacy for a prescription, and it's up to Medicare whether they pay for it. You can do it in-house if it's cheaper and easier, and then you decide if yeah. So it's doable. It's a bit more paperwork. It's definitely a reason to have a good attorney, but you could pull that out. And then it's a feeder team, right? This is minor leagues for the major leagues. You've got your patient panel of you and 2 PAs, and so then when you convert over, your pre-enrollment's your best goal. You're going to market to all your patients. And remember, we're fixing a problem for ourselves, but first and foremost, we're fixing a problem for all of our patients. It's bad for us because it's bad for them. So when you tell them, here's why I'm doing direct care and all the things, you recruit from that whole panel size. So you'll grow really quickly, and then the other people who don't follow still have providers left there, and then you pull one at a time. And then the patients that are still left over might allow you to grow and add more providers. So it really is a great base to grow and feed from.
So the second part of that is my hospital privileges, for some reason, also dictate that I can't opt out of Medicare. And so, which is, for all the ridiculous constraints we have for hospital privileges that are dictated by non-clinicians. But how do I get around that?
It depends on the hospital. You may not be able to get around it. What I would say is, let me get around it or lose me. There's Dr. Hasib with Health Suite does that. He's an internist who still does some hospital work, but his partners have let him just not see Medicare patients. So the work's getting divvied up the same, just slightly different than before. So it's doable, but some hospitals are just impossible to work with. So, yep. Yes, sir.
Hey, Josh. I heard you talking earlier about one of the things you transition into as salesperson, and I heard a number of questions regarding, converting people. We opened about 2.5 months ago, and if I can offer an observation, I've been in sales all my life, but I'm front office staff now. My wife is a practitioner. When we sit and we talk to somebody who is a past patient, considering whether they want to come into this new style of practice, we started out by emphasizing all the things we do, all our costs and the stuff. And sitting and watching my wife talk to a patient who she's had for 8 years, the moment she starts talking about their relationship, their eyes light up, they're buying in. And so this is not to say don't hide the stuff. You obviously have to be upfront and explain the parts of the practice and the costs and so forth. But as Josh said earlier, and it really came clear when you watch that interaction, they are buying you. Yeah. And so, say the stuff, but emphasize that relationship. That's what they want, and that's what they'll respond to.
It's easy to focus on the dollar things that we can do, but they are a little dry. And this is relationship-based care. But there's a great business vignette about knowing what your customer is buying you for. What job are they having you do? And sometimes it's very relationship-based. A good example of this is a fast food joint, long story short, found that they needed to make milkshakes thicker in the morning because people were buying them because it was food that they could drink on a long commute, one-handed, clean, easy, and took time. But then they didn't realize that they were upsetting parents in the evening by having thick milkshakes that the kids weren't finishing in time. So what is your customer doing? And you're right. Sometimes you're going to win a patient because of just pure dollars and cents. And that's easy and clean and objective and reproducible. And other times you're going to win it because you know that person and you know what they've been through, and you sit and you listen and letting them know that you'll be there and they'll have access to you. Those are the soft sell things, the subjective things, but that patients still really value. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Leanne. I'm probably the only non-doctor in the room. I'm here at the request of my clients. I'm a profit coach. And so I'm going to ask the question that I think everybody wonders, but nobody's going to ask but me. What is the average revenue that we see in the first 3 years? Because typical startups are 3 years, right, to get to profit. So what's the average revenue that we see for a DPC practice?
It's a good question, but I think we are limited a little bit on talking about price. So as long as Bethany doesn't come in running and telling me to stop doing this. Let's just pick a random number out of the hat, $50 per patient per month. Because that's exactly our math, is it really depends on your growth. And let's do a converting practice. A good conversion practice is going to get 200 or 300 patients in 2 to 3 months. That's a solid, very solid start. So now you're you're halfway to your panel of 600. So your profit is going to start right away. If we do $50 per patient per month times 600 patients, that's $360,000 when you're full. So, it's a twelfth of that the first month, and then you grow into it. Year 2 and 3, if you fill up in 1 year like Kissy Blackwell did in Texas, it's going to be very consistent. I mean, that's the goal. You may lose 5, 10 here and there, but you're going to gain 5, 10 too. Also, you can usually go over 600 as your patients get tucked in and you get better with the model, and taking 5 new ones a month is a whole lot easier than taking 50 new ones a month. So 50 times 600 for your first year to build up to that growth. Year 2 and 3, if you're full, that would be the profit revenue. Typically, I would say 30% overhead. I think that's going to vary quite a bit. My rent's $6,000 a month. I think rent for Vance is $300 a month. So there's that huge difference. And then he's more profitable or equally as profitable on 100 fewer patients than I am. So he has that wiggle room too. It will really depend. Some people have their spouse work for them as an RN, and they don't pay him anything, and and that works out great too in my scenario. Or they'll start with a part-time. So it's hard to say what true profit is, money left over after expenses, because it really depends on what your expenses is and your growth. But you can take those core numbers and run some calculations and base it from there. And I think that's the real value of direct care is July's a slow month. I saw 18 patients last week, but I'm paid the same amount because of the membership model, and that's the true power of it.
We are transitioning from established practices, so we have a fair amount of people signed up beforehand. How many of those people are going to be expected to be seen in our new location the first month, or the first few months? Do we need to save spots for them to come in? Can we just do it at an open house for everybody?
How would you onboard a bunch of new patients? The value of converting is you already know these people. So they're going to have their 6 schedule, but they may not need a whole lot new or more. It's always nice to lay hands on a new practice, though, because you want to remind them what they're getting. But you can do that through texts or emails. You can also let them know that, hey, this was a huge success, which sort of is a problem because now we're back-ordered a little bit. So we onboard everybody, thank you, this is a journey, tell a story, and let them know you're going to work through it. So you're right, you're going to limit your visits, but now 50% of your day isn't doing insurance stuff. So you can see a whole bunch of new patients at 30-minute non-rushed appointments, but you already know them, they don't need tucked in, they've had health care for the previous years, versus your new patients. When you're starting a brand new clinic, every patient is new to you, and they maybe haven't had their diabetes controlled in 5 years. So it is a very different onboarding process for an established clinic with patients that are coasting versus brand new patients. Brand new patients, you're definitely going to want to give more time, but everyone else, you can onboard them pretty quick. The training will be the hard part. How are they trained before? Do they page the office? Do they come in for everything? One of the efficiencies of the DPC model is not everything has to be seen in the office, but everyone says, I need to be seen in the office because that's the only way we've ever done it. So, there is that retrain yourself, your staff, your patients. Oh yeah, it's a skin thing, text me a picture. And that eases up the day a little bit, yeah. Because then, hey, they want to chat, and it's a new practice. How's it going, doc? And good, okay. And so you'll answer the same 10 questions at every visit, and it's not medical, so it's slowing down your time a little.
Josh, thanks for your time here today. Since you've helped to transition or witnessed many practices transitioning over to DPC, I'm in a situation where I'm an employed physician and I have that 90-day, I got to notify my employer that I went out. So the big question I have is, obviously opting out of Medicare and insurances, but from a realistic standpoint in the legal aspect, who's responsible for telling the insurances that I'm out? Is it my employer, or is that my responsibility?
Is it your employer's responsibility if they're the ones contract? If you're group contracted, you pulling out of the company pulls you out of the group, that's it. Check and double check that, though. If it's yourself, then yeah, you would be the one. Now, if you're changing, that's one thing where sometimes, I've closed this LLC, and everything is in that LLC. And I send a certified letter as of effective this date, we're no longer doing business. And then I'm opening a new one over here. That's one way you can shorten that time a little bit. Some clinics, though, just don't want to go through that and close down one LLC and open another. But if you're leaving an employed group, it's usually going to stay with the employer. Okay. So it makes it a little easier.
Thank you.
Josh, I've been the most spoiled 70-year-old guy I've ever known, and what I'm hearing, this is my first meeting at a primary care patient-directed care group. Background, I left a 600-member physician group, did all my time, 30 years of it in family medicine, and over the past 4 years, I've had the privilege of learning about functional medicine, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, and regenerative injection therapy, which I've done for 10 years, but I've added the biocellulars to it. So this geezer here now would like to focus in a micro niche of direct working with folks. And I forgot the most important thing. I encourage all of this audience to learn about what is called the RECODE protocol, or reversing cognitive diseases or dementia. Dr. Dale Bredesen's got a book, their YouTubes, see it, learn about it. So the 4 areas in my micro practice, this is to give you an outline of what I'd like to do. The real question is, what would be the best way for me to build my practice in this stoic 600-member group who are encouraged to self-refer, self-direct, because we own the surgery centers, we own all the surgeons, all the specialists, and we're supercharged to keep our work there. I want to be separate on my own with the model you're all doing. Am I clear?
Yeah, I think so. How do you grow a model with a very specific focus? And that goes back to defining success and the fact that everyone's going to do this different. There's not a right or wrong way, but you want to go into it eyes wide open. Say someone else wanted a very specific mental health focus, and someone told them they couldn't do that. I say, my fault, if anything, is I say yes to everything, but yes and how. Instead of just no, you can't do that. But look through it. You're going to do a niche thing, so you're marketing to an even smaller bit of people. And that's okay if you're okay with growing slower. What I recommend as a whole is paint a broad brush of value. Yes, I love family medicine, but I also love functional medicine. But I'll do family medicine. So people will maybe not be familiar with functional medicine, but they know family. So you're trying to sell something to them that they already don't know, which is direct primary care, but you can tag that with something very specific as family medicine. That's a thing in their head. And functional medicine, they're not aware of. So now I'm not aware of functional medicine, and I'm not aware of direct primary care. So those are 2 things I'm not attached to. So you painted yourself into this corner of, I do functional medicine for women who are 30. That's great for those women, but it may mean a really slower growth. I'll say, there's good things in cosmetics, there's good thing in sports, there's good thing in weight loss. I'll go to a family doctor, and the family doctor may do some weight loss, but I'm not going to go to the weight loss doctor and expect to have family medicine. So as you're building a niche practice, start first with a very global, high-value thing if you want to grow as fast as possible. Then when you have, say 400 or 500 patients, you're full, you're comfortable, you're sustainable, you're thriving, then you could limit your growth from that point on to just your niche and encourage those people to, like you said, refer. But I think sometimes people start in a very specific niche, like trans health. And depending on the town, there may just not be enough trans patients seeking out that care to support a practice of 600. So you can do trans health and family. Those are the type of things where you give yourself the best chance to be successful because you're doing the most things for the most people. Yeah. And as he walks over, let's see. Are you required to have an AED? I don't think so. Check your state. I don't know any doctors who have one. And I'm not going to touch the translation one because I think we've talked about that with Phil before and it's complex. So, but probably, and it's an edge case. What tips do you have for somebody starting directly out of residency? Go lean. That's what we started straight out of residency. It's very doable. It's getting easier every year as more and more people know what direct primary care is. If you do a Google alert for this, you'll see new articles every day, and it is becoming a very commonplace thing. But don't straddle yourself with more debt if you don't need to. It's very okay to start with a smaller practice, a nice practice, and that you spent $10,000 on, and then grow to a newer, bigger, more expensive practice down the road. And when we started, we bought brand new exam tables. When I expanded to a second location, I bought half price everything on eBay. You realize people aren't buying the newness of your supplies, they're buying access to you. You can start on a shoestring and a stethoscope. So in starting, stay very lean, but also back to the previous question, start with a very high value in terms of coming out of residency. Nobody knows you, which is a problem, and nobody knows you, which is a great thing. So you're going to go out and build your reputation, and you're going to talk to people, and they're thrilled that you're at the Chamber of Commerce because doctors don't go to the Chamber of Commerce. And they're thrilled you're at their business meeting or the Rotary, and they're worried about health care, and you're the guy with an answer, and you're talking about it, so you're becoming a social value that's very helpful. So those are great tips for the newest practices.
Hey, it's me again.
Yep.
On that topic, how did you manage when you were just coming out of residency to balance the, I guess, first to find financing to start a practice with that much still debt behind you, and then balancing that those first few months when you have very little income, but you still have to pay a mortgage and feed your loved ones?
The best part about starting out after residency is you're used to being poor. You don't need a ton of money. And, 40,000 a year is not poor, but, you're used to residency money. And you can stay in that model. But doctors have an unprecedented ability to make money. And I think sometimes we don't appreciate that. You can't be a lawyer and just go out and sleep in a courthouse in rural Kansas and make $1,200, thankfully. But you can as a doctor. You can moonlight. You can do telemedicine. You can do all these other things. And you can even moonlight in your own practice. If I have no patients, I have maximal time for making money. As I get more patients, I have a little less time for that, but it's still doable. Harvard Business School has a rule, Droom, don't run out of money, which seems super obvious in hindsight, but I guess that's what you go to Harvard for. So, the extra money, extra time, extra commitment just feeds that. That's the blood of the practice. So you can start very lean, you can do extra money, and don't worry about the debt. Pay attention to it, don't let it get out of control, be smart about it. But we all did this. I'd be more worried about starting a traditional practice with all that debt. Fighting the hospital. Every friend I have that joined with the major hospital system locally was told base salary plus this for production. And then the hospital got bought, they changed the rules, they did central scheduling, all the simple stuff went to, nurse clinics, and they never could meet production. So the real carrot that got them to take the job is completely different now, and it's a huge difference in salary. So the current model seems much more stressful for the debt. The debt side is very manageable. I wouldn't worry too much about that, but I would focus on extra revenue with moonlighting.
So if you were to start a DPC practice and it would just be one physician and you had a nurse that was going to be working with you, how do you help them reconcile the fact that they might not be making money right away? Or do they? Do you pay your employee, first and potentially not make any money on your own?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think the majority of the time you're going to pay your staff. You're either going to get a business loan, a line of credit, or you're going to moonlight. Because most of the time, really good staff are going to want full payment. The difference is, and even when you're hiring a doctor, most people will go into one of two categories. I want less money now or more money later. You're running a business. You're willing to go into debt for a little bit to make more money later. But an employee is here for this. But what you might be able to do is split that time. There's a lot of ways to negotiate these thorny points. So I don't need you full-time. So if you'll still do this and that, like your other job that you don't love a lot, I got you halfway out of the hospital. And then as we grow, I'll bring you over more and more. I really liked starting with a full-time RN because then I could leave the office and go recruit and public speaking and really try to grow the practice. But that lean book, the book Lean Startup might say, if I have no staff, I have no overhead. And that's a $60,000 thing. So when I get 100 patients, then I'll hire somebody. But I went from making money back from the black into the red, but it's these incremental growths that are very manageable. So maybe you start with an MA or an LPN and say, the goal here is 3 to 6 months. I'm going to need an RN, but I'll get you now for this. So you can be creative in how you manage those costs. Yeah.
Hey, Josh, can I ask a quick question? Okay, so I was just wondering, I'm an employed physician. I've been working for the past 3 years. And I don't really know exact my patient panel because my employer said I don't have a cap. It's
a very nice employer. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was just wondering, is there any tips that you can give us? I heard about blogs and Facebook about, as an employed physician currently, is there any way I can notify my current patients that I may be leaving and opening a practice?
Yes. Starting getting approval from your employer to start something else separate from that, so that you can say, well, here's my general health, politics, nutrition, information, exercise type blog. So follow me there, so then I can tell you where I go later. Some states, and Phil might know, but a good lawyer would know too, is the hospital might be required to at least send a letter about where you're going, but it may not be the nicest letter. On the way out, so-and-so will no longer be with us. They're located across town. You might work with the employer to say, well, I'm still going to need you for referrals if it's a hospital system. I'm going to send you ER and imaging and some things, or at least let them think that, because that contract, that's more valuable than this. So, well, I will send people to you, but I'm also going to look for affordable imaging. So you can negotiate that out to maybe where you get to send your own letter. And a lot of big employers will be very stiff. I imagine if they said you don't have a cap, they're not going to be super friendly and let you leave with that information. Yeah. But if it's amazing how patients will find you. Mm-hmm. So once you get out, just be public, go back to where they were at, let them know. But yeah, if you have a longer runway, 3-6 months, you can start telling them, general information about where you might be. But it's really not worth fighting with the hospital about that. Worst case scenario, you can't send any letters out. You're going to do Facebook or advertising or local speaking, and there will be a news article. You'll get your word out. It's great to have that pre-enrollment, but if it's not worth a legal fight with the employer if you just have to end clean.
I heard from a friend recently saying there's anything illegal about putting a billboard. So right by your clinic where you worked at, you could put a billboard.
I would 100%
It's not that
do
expensive.
I've done that. We had a doctor join, and her previous clinic wouldn't send the charts for patients, wouldn't tell them, and they were being rude about it. And so we just got the billboard as close as we could to that location, and an arrow, Dr. Smith now seeing. Yeah. So nothing is stopping you from that. Yeah, so. I'm waiting to see what Phil does. I don't know, Phil, is there any way to get your patient's demographic information before you leave? Is that wrong to take patient health information? Yeah, that's what I thought. Well, they're going to call the demographics part of the record, so you're going to draw a blurry line. It's better to ask and get permission, and I'm it's better to get permission than forgiveness than permission kind of guy. But they'll just bury you in headache and hassle. So either get it right or just not worry about it. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm a do now, ask later guy. Probably not a great idea.
It's worked so far. Yeah.
Well, I'm a family doc from way back, and I have a small addiction medicine practice. I'm a fellowship-trained addictionologist, and I practice family medicine with my patients. I guess, I have 150 members. I never really thought about calling them members. And their fee is like $200 once a monthly. So I after a while, it's like, I get in just like, give me somebody to sew up or something, I mean, it's just singular. So I'm going to start with your model and do it right. But everybody says, 450 patients, 400, 300, 600. How many patients can one person handle? 800?
What would be the max?
Yes.
I think this is one reason the employed versions have not worked, and I would recommend against. Is so far all of them have tried to pump that up to 12 to 1,500 patients, and before long you're back in the old model. What is the right number? Well, it depends if you're a pediatrician or a geriatrician. I think a pediatrician could easily do 1,000. I think a geriatrician would like 400. On a financial standpoint, you're doing math. You're saying, what is my goal income? What do I want to make? Let me work backwards to see how many patients that takes. So for us, that math was 600 patients. I have 728 because I've been in it 8, 9 years, and somebody moves to town and they really want their family member picked up and yada, yada. And that's great. It's very manageable. I still see about 1% of my patients a day. I think my patients understand it to be very cushioned because we started, and when I only had 30 patients, you got an hour and a half if you wanted it because I was bored. And now I kind of like to keep it to 30 minutes if I can. If they got up to 800, 900, and you sold it on the idea of same-day appointments every day, and it's bleeding into the next day, you're going to start to lose that patient relationship. If you say you're going to respond to text messages really quickly, and now it ends up being a day all the time because you've got too many patients, then they're not going to text. They're just going to come into the office, and then the office gets proportionally busier. It becomes this death spiral. So I think some doctors are more hands-on and less hands-on. A great example, they're not here today. John Isbicki and Harry Isbicki, two brothers in Erie, Pennsylvania who practice. And John writes incredibly detailed notes, and it takes him way too long. And Harry writes really short notes, and so he's always done first. And they're brothers practicing the same practice, direct care, and that's just their preference. So one could probably take a lot more patients and the other one couldn't. Those are the kind of metrics you really want to look at when deciding what your patient panel is. Pick a base number, which is most typically 500 to 600 patients, so you know what your financial risk is, but be aware that you don't want to grow just for the sake of growing. Okay.
So my name is Erin Cooper, and my husband and I are from Lexington, Kentucky, and we're opening next month, DPC. But we started thinking about this almost a year ago, and I just really have a comment to follow up about what do you do when you're employed. And so what we struggled with was, well, how do we know our patient's going to follow us? Because we weren't allowed. A year ago, we didn't want our employer to know that we were thinking about leaving, let alone start telling patients. So what we've been doing is actually just talking about DPC in our visits with people to the appropriate patient who we think maybe this family would be interested. We just say, hey, have you guys heard about this? It's this new thing. Nobody's really doing it in the area. What do you think about that? Not saying we're doing it, but just throwing it out there and then sort of keeping track of those people.
It's a great, very subtle tactic. What you can do is you can say, I just went to this conference. I'm trying to gauge your interest. I'm never saying I'm leaving and doing this. And they'll ask, well, that sounds great. Are you going to do it? I said, I don't know. I said, I'm employed here right now. I'm sure something like that is close enough.
Yes, it was subtle, yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, fingers crossed. But it would gauge their interest. It would get the word out. It would be a nice intro into that so that when they hear it again in the news article or on the radio or the billboard we buy to be spiteful, okay, yep, I knew she was talking about that. I'm going to find her. And so it would cue that up very well. You're probably still going to upset your employer, but we don't necessarily care. Yes, sir.
All right. So my question is, I'm currently an employed hospitalist, and I work 7 on, 7 off, and I'm trying to start a DPC. So any advice on how to start that? And second question is, do I have to opt out of Medicare?
For Medicare?
Yes.
Okay. What you do as a hospitalist who wants to convert over, are you on a week-on, week-off schedule? Great. Now you're on a week-on, week-on schedule. My partner, Doug, was a hospitalist when we started. We didn't know how this would grow or what this was going to turn into, and we thought it might be years before we need him, based on our initial projections. So I started because that was lean. He could keep making money. We didn't need two people without an income. And then he would work a week as a hospitalist, and then he'd come in and just help in the office, help on business meetings or public speaking and stuff. So his week offs were growing the practice. So that made it very easy while you're still being paid to be building the practice. If you're taking the Medicare and whatnot for hospital, you just don't take any Medicare patients in the direct care practice. So even though it's still hybrid, it's that hybrid on a plan to convert, and we still always want that money, right? We don't want to run out of money. So if we can leverage one job to help the other one grow, well, we can market this to a whole lot of people that aren't Medicare patients until I hit that revenue source where I don't need the hospital as much anymore, and then switch. Or get creative, like people have been doing, buy the billboard or sneak in the direct care conversation. Just see if the employer group will allow a different way to manage the hospital. There's a group in Tulsa, there's 3 hospitalists in the town outside of Tulsa, and they want to convert to direct care, and they're 2 of the 3 hospitalists. So they kind of have the hospital by the short hairs. So that they know that they're probably not going to get fired because they're not going to get 2 more hospitalists quickly into this small Oklahoma town. So they're being a little bit more flexible, but they are going to work there, not take Medicare until one's ready to drop out full-time, opt out full-time, and then grow until the other one's ready. So you can leverage these things. It doesn't have to be all or none. So,
all right.
Thank you for your time. Hope everyone's enjoying themselves.